Right, so today's paper, it says May 2020, but actually there was no exams in May 2020 because of COVID, but they'd already printed them. They reissued this as the November paper, so strictly speaking, we're doing November paper 1. Now, very quickly, just to let you know what you would need on this paper to get whichever grade you're looking for. There's 80 marks altogether, and to get a 9, you just need 63. To get an 8, you need 52. For a 7, you need 10 less than that, 42, and it goes down in tens, 32 for 6. So it's just over half marks for 7, which is like an old grade A. 5 is 22, that's like a low B, and 6 you can think of as a high B. Grade 4 was 13. Then if you get 8 marks, you get a 3, and below that you would get ungraded. But if you're punching around a 3 or a 4, you're better off on the foundation paper anyway. Now, it doesn't mean you get a 9 if you get 63 marks on this paper, because you do have the other 2 papers to go with it. You would have to get an overall score averaging out as that for each one, so it would be 189 marks for the 3 papers, but you can get yourself a bit more marks, give yourself some compensation later on. Right, let's crack on. Question 1, the nth term. Now, many of you hopefully would realise that what's going on here is it's getting bigger by 3 each time. And some people write n plus 3, but that would be wrong. What goes up in 3s? The 3 times table. So that links it to the 3 times table. Now, the 3 times table would be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. What do I need to do to those numbers every time to get to what I want? It's 2 less, so it's 3n take 2. The other way is just to look at the first one, because the n stands for the first term, n is always 1, so 3 take 2 gives me 1. Question 2. So generally the best thing to do would be there will be a mark, there's 3 marks for this, a mark for converting these into top heavy fractions. So 3 2s are 6, plus 1 makes 7 thirds. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15 quarters. Now if I multiply these together, you could just multiply the tops, or you could say there's 1 3 and 3, 5 3s and 15, and then 7 times 5 is 35, 1 times 4 is 4, and 35 divided by 4 is 8, with 3 remainder, and those 3 still need to be divided by 4, so it's 8 3/4. Question 3 is one that a lot of people just guess at. You've got 4 graphs there, and then down below we've got a table. Y equals minus x cubed, y equals x cubed, y equals x squared, and y equals 1 over x. I'm going to write them all above so we can think about them all at the same time. Okay, so looking at these, I'm going to think about which one of these is the easiest. I think this is the easiest. Y equals x squared. So when you square a number, you always get a positive answer, don't you? So if x was 1, y would be 1. If x was 2, y would be 4. If x was 3, 3 squared is 9, so it's going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But what happens if it's negative? Because negative times a negative is a positive, that means all of your negative values of x are going to give you a y answer. So y equals x squared must be this one. Now, if you're looking at this, 2 of these are very similar, and 2 of these graphs are very similar. So what happens with y equals x cubed is, if it's a positive value, it's very similar to what's happened here. But if it's a negative value, negative 3 to the power 3 would be negative 27, not plus 27. So for that reason, it's here when our negative value of x gives us a negative value of y getting bigger and bigger. So this is y equals x cubed. And if you just flip the negative over, you get a reflection in the y-axis. So this is y equals negative x cubed. And we could think about what results we get when we divide by 1 by the different inputs that we put, if you think of the x values as the inputs. But you could just say, well, what I've got left is y equals 1 over x. And what all that gives us is that graph A is equals 1 over x. Graph B was minus x cubed. Graph C is y equals x cubed, and graph D is y equals x squared. Question 4. Alright, 4 triangles. The key word here is congruent. Congruent just means exactly the same size. So the angles will be the same and the lengths. So there's only one mark on this question, so we're not looking for a lot. We know there's 180 degrees in a triangle. So if I was to do 80 plus 45, that would get me to 125. Plus 55 gets me 180. Oh, we've got the same thing here. If you add 80 to that, we get the same thing. Now the length opposite that angle is the same length, so these must be the same triangles. So it's A and D. When it comes to the other two, we only know one angle, and the angle is actually opposite. The different angles are opposite the same side, so they must be different triangles. Question 5 is 3 marks, well worth putting a few minutes into it. So he pays £10 for 24 chocolate bars. He sells all for 50p each. What's his percentage profit? Well, we need to think about how much money he's going to make first of all. So 24 times half a pound is going to be £12. So the profit is going to equal 12 take 10 is £2. So we want to know what percentage that is of the amount he risked in the first place. So it's profit over the investment times 100, if you wanted a formula for it. So the profit is £2. The investment, he risked £10, but £12 is irrelevant. It only tells us how much we got in the first place, and then times that by 100. So that's 0.2 times 100, isn't it? Which is 20%. Now, question 6 has got 5 marks for it, so take your time on it. The key here is that you're not going to be able to work out EAB, which is the one that we want, straight away. So what we're going to do is work out any angles that we can work out, and give a reason for each stage of your working. You will get 3 of the 5 marks for giving reasons. So the first thing I notice is I've got a straight line here. So 148, 180 take 148 is 32. So I can say ABE equals 32 degrees as angles on a straight line sum to 180 degrees. So that's going to get me a mark for that, as well as possibly getting a mark for that too. What else do I know? I also know that this here, I've got parallel lines here and here, which means if I was to slide that angle up to there, it would be the same angle. So I can say that AEB, the middle letter being where the angle is, equals 63 degrees. And the reason for that is corresponding angles are equal, and it's corresponding with A, D, C. But as long as you've got that word corresponding in there, that'll be Okay, so it's just sliding from there to there, corresponding angles. And then finally, hopefully you've noticed that we've got a triangle there. So 63 and 32 makes 95. 180 take 95 is 85 degrees as angles in a triangle sum to 180 degrees. That nearly always comes in. Angles on a straight line, angles summing to 100 in a triangle adding to 180 degrees. The other one that wasn't here was base angles of an isosceles triangle being equal. Not a bad idea just to write those down as soon as you see a question like this. You don't get a mark just for writing them down. You've got to ally it with where you've used it, but just writing it down may well help you find what you need to do. Okay, so question 7, there's 3 marks for this one, by the way. When you're comparing, you need to compare 2 things. One is an average, the other is a range. It can be the interquartile range. In this case, the information you're given about the girls is just the smallest and the biggest. So the range for the girls is going to be 170, take 150, but you don't leave it as that, it is 20 centimeters. So you're going to need that. We're also going to need to know the median of the boys. Now there are 15 year 7 boys, so we need to find the one in the middle. If you add 1 to how many there are and halve it, that means it's the 8th boy. So if I count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the 8th one. So that 8 there, but that's not an 8, is it? It's 168, because that's what the key is telling you here. This is like a bit like a bar chart, a stem and leaf diagram, but made with the numbers. So the median equals 168 centimeters, and the range for the boys is going to be the biggest, which is 182, take the smallest, which is 158. So that's going to be, counting up there, 2 to 160 plus another 22, 24 centimeters. And when it comes to comparing them, we need to write something that just says, basically says what's going on. When you compare, you don't need to have an opinion about it. You can say the boys' median height is 3 centimeters taller than the girls. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is the range. The boys' range is 4 centimeters more than the girls. And you don't actually even have to interpret that and say that means that the boys are slightly less predictable in how high tall they are than the girls. That is all that you need. Question 8. So the prism's got a height of 3. We know the force, the pressure is the force divided by the area. They're telling us the volume is 18 cubic meters. So it says the pressure on the floor is 75. So I know that the pressure is 75 equals the force divided by the area. Now the volume of a prism is the cross-sectional area times the height. Now we know the height is 3, so if the volume is 18 equals the area times the height, that's 3, I can divide by 3, 18 over 3 equals the area, which must therefore be 6 square meters. I can now put that into my formula and say the force divided by 6 is 75, So I need to multiply both sides by 6. 75 times 6 equals the force. So what's 75 times 6? Well, 75 times 2 is 150. Times that by 3 gets me 450, and newtons is the units, but actually there's no marks for that because it was already written down there. Writing numbers in order of size. Key to this would be to put them all just as normal numbers, I would say. So timesing by 10 to the power 5 means I've got to times this by 10 5 times. So that'll move the decimal point twice, and then another 3. Here I need to divide for negative powers because it's like timesing by a tenth. So divide by 10 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. That means my decimal point will go there, and I've got space for 2 zeros before the 672. Times by 10 4 times, so I've got 672, put 4 zeros on there, and then that one is that. So starting with the smallest, this is 10 times the smallest. I've got 0.000672. Then I've got 67.2 times 10 to the negative 4. Then I've got 6.72 times 10 to the 5. It is best to put it in the original form that they had there, but as long as you've shown clearly how each one links, then it doesn't matter, but I would recommend doing it this way. And then 672 times 10 to the power 4. Here's a 3-mark question. Now people do get in a real old mix on this. I did the first time I looked at this. Actually, there's a very simple way to go about it. So a over b is 2 over 5. So I'm going to say, right, I want a to b. Well, a is 2 when b is 5. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So b to c, when b is 3, c is 4. And now what we need, so that we can talk about a and c together, is we need those b numbers to be the same. Now you can do what you like with ratios in terms of multiplying or dividing, as long as you do both sides by the same number. So I'm going to times both by 3 to get 6 to 15. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to get both these b's to be the same number. 3 times 5 is 15, lowest common denominator of 3 and 5. 5 times 4 is 20. Now I can say a to b to c is 6 to 15 to 20, and it's done. 11 parts A and B. C will come along in a minute. Part B is also worth 2 marks. So what we need to do here is find the quad root of both of those. So that's going to be the same thing as saying so what we're looking for there is what number to the power 4 is 81, and that's 3 to the power 4 is 81, so that's 3. And then 10 to the power 8 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So because it looks like 100 times 100 would get you 10 to the power 4 times 100, 10 to the power 6 times 100 is 10 to the power 8. So the quad root of 10 to the power 8 must be 10 to the power 2 or 100. So we're looking at 3 times 100, which is 300. Negative powers. First thing to do is say it's going to be 1 over and turn the power positive. Now worry about the fact that it's a fraction. Fractional powers are to do with roots. It's the square root, and that's because when we add powers we get the same thing. So this is the same as saying 1 is over the square root of 64, and the square root of 64 is 8. so it's 1/8. And here's the nasty finisher, 3 to the power n over n, 9 to the n minus 1 as a power of 3. Now there's 2 marks here, and because this is a power of 3, it's all about turning 9 into a power of 3. Now I know that 3 squared equals 9, so I'm going to use that, and you get a mark just for writing this. 3 squared to the power n minus 1. Now, when you multiply up when you've got powers with brackets, you multiply the powers. So you've got 3 over n there, and then 3 over 2 times n is 2n. 2 times negative 2 is negative 2. Now have another think. What do we do when we're dividing by powers? We take them, don't we? So this means 3 to the n divided by 3 to the 2n minus 2. So that means it's going to give us 3 to the power of n take 2n take 2. Now when you take 2n, n minus 2n will be minus n, and taking a negative is the same as adding, so that gives us 3 to the minus n, but when you take negative 2, that will be adding, so it's 3 to the power 2 take n. So that is a nasty one, but it's certainly possible to get 1 mark on it, even if you get lost on the second. Question 12, cumulative frequency. Well, it's quite difficult to get the whole thing on the page, but anyway, we'll give it a go. So first thing, only for 1 mark, is to fill in about these 80 people the cumulative frequency table. Hopefully you've spotted on the cumulative table, as opposed to the first table, on the left hand side it says 200 every time. So we've got 5 people is the same as the one above, but then from 200 to 300 we've got those 5 people plus those 10, so that gives us 15. Then from 200 to 350 we've got to add in these 20, and then add in the next 20, and then the next 15, and then we've got 80 there at the end. Next up it says on the grid opposite we need to draw a cumulative frequency graph for our completed table, and when we do that we're going to need to plot these values against the top end of our wages. So to show that there's 15 people here that have got 300 or less, and so on. So let's have a go at doing that. So we're plotting at 250 we've got 5, at 315, at 350 35, 55, at 400, 70 at 450, finishing off with 80 at 500. And then what they want is not for you to get a ruler and draw straight lines to everything, but they want you to sketch in a curve. Now this doesn't have to be beautifully done, so don't worry if you're not a great artist. It's going to be starting at 0 because we've got no results before then, and then notice I'm not trying to do it in one line. I'm just sort of keeping an eye on where the next ones coming up are and trying to make a kind of smooth arc towards it. It takes a bit of practice. The more you do with these, the easier it gets. So it'll be about like that. Now the next thing that it asks us is, and this is for 3 marks, this is half the marks of the question, 60% of the group of people have a weekly wage of £360 or less. Is 1 correct? So let's have a little look. 360 pounds or less. So if we go to 360 and draw up until we hit the line and then go straight across, this is part of showing how we get there. That looks to me like, actually it could be 47 actually if I go to there. So 47 out of 80, and what I've got to do is work out what 60% of 80 would be. 60% of 80, well, I know that 10% is 8 times 6 is going to be 48. So that looks pretty close, but not quite. So I would say no, 47 is not 60%. That would have been 48. And even though that's very close, if you look at my curve, that would be, it's never going to be right up there. Now if your curve happened to come in and it did come in on exactly 48, then you would say yes, and that's okay. That was within the mark scheme for that to be okay as well. Okay, moving on. Now question 13, it's only 3 marks. It's a sort of question a lot of people leave blank or get very confused over, but it's just one to take your time on. First thing is, when you're dealing with density, you need your formula. Now it's actually given to you by the units, because that's saying density equals kilograms. That's how heavy something is, that's your mass. And what does that mean? That means being divided by meters cubed, and meters cubed are volume. So it's density equals mass over volume. To work out the density of liquid C, I need to know how much of it I've got and what in terms of how heavy it all is, and also its total volume. So for liquid A, I need to work out the volume first of all. So A, I've got a density of 70 equaling a mass of 1400 over my volume. So I could multiply by my volume to give me 70V equals 1400. I could divide by 70. 1400 divided by 70, oh that's nice, divide them both by 10, and then 7 goes into 14 twice, so that is 20 meters cubed for A. Then I'm also going to have a little look at B, and I need to know what I don't know at the moment. So what I don't know is the mass. So the density is 280, the mass is what I don't know, over the volume I do know is 30. So if I the mass is going to be 280 times 30. So how do I do that? Well, 3 times 8 is 24, 3 2s are 6 plus 2 makes 8. That's going to give me 84 with 1 2 zeros added on. So it's 8,400 kilograms. So for C, the volume is going to be 20 from A plus the 30 from B, which is 50 cubic meters. The mass is going to be 1400 of A plus 8400 of B, which is 9,800 kilograms. Therefore, we can now work out the density is going to be the mass divided by the volume. 9,800 divided by 50. Divide them both by 10, then we just divide by 5. So that goes in once with 4 left over. It goes in 9 times with 3 left over. Goes in 6. So 196, and then that just goes down on there with our kilograms per meters cubed.